Today we're going to talk about the new features in PhpStorm 2016.2. It's been out for a couple of weeks, so hopefully everybody's managed to have a play around and see some of the new features. We obviously won't be able to cover every single new feature and ticket that was fixed, but we're going to cover some of my favorites, including the PHP 7 stuff, which I'm really excited about. If you've seen me on Twitter or blogging, you can tell that this stuff is kind of really made me excited. So hopefully I can impart some of that excitement to you people. But yeah, so we should just make a start. So let's keep kicking on. And the first thing we're going to cover is the new PHP 7 stuff. So all being well, I can bring up PhpStorm and I can bring up the correct PHP script, and everybody can see my screen. You can see at the bottom I've got a Presentation Assistant plugin installed, which will show you the key combinations I use as I'm moving around the IDE. If you miss anything or if you have any questions, stick them up into the questions pane. I'll try to answer questions as I finish each section so that they're relevant to the section that we've just been talking about rather than at the end. So yeah, let's make a start here. So the first thing I want to do in this file is to remove some of this stuff. So what we've got here is a file which has the new PHP 7 scalar type hint. So the type hints that are more than just array or object names. We can now type hint on things that are boolean, strings, integers, floats, all of the scalar types. This is brand new stuff in PHP 7. And for me, one of the killer features to upgrade, as well as the speed bonuses and the memory usage and all the other stuff, this is really, for me, the killer feature. And we've supported PHP 7's new constructs, and we've supported these new scalar type hints and the return type hints since, I think, PhpStorm 9 or 10. Don't quote me. But this is really the first version where we've done some really cool inspections to make using these type hints really useful and enjoyable. So you can see that you can actually use these type hints in two different modes. We can use it in loose mode, coercive mode, where if I pass anything into this function that's not a Boolean, PHP will just cast it into a Boolean in the typical way that PHP has always done, in the way that we know and love. So if I now call this accepts Boolean, if I can actually type, here we go, accepts Boolean, and I pass in something that isn't a Boolean, this will just get casted into a Boolean inside this function, which is kind of useful. And the same thing we can do with the accept string and the accept int function. So accept int, and we can pass a string in. It's all very good. In fact, what I've actually done here is left something turned on that we want to cover later in the webinar, so let me quickly turn that off so I don't confuse everyone. We will cover the new parameters later on, so I've kind of given the game away a bit here, but that's all good. So let me turn that off so I don't confuse everyone. Here we go. So then I can run the accept string function and I can pass in a Boolean, and all is good here because we're in loose mode, so we don't get any warnings or any information back from PhpStorm. But as soon as I enable the strict type mode, this means that now instead of just coercing things loosely into the types, PHP will actually throw an error. It'll throw a catchable fatal error if we try and pass in anything into these functions that aren't the type that we've declared. And immediately you can see that we now have these inspections firing. So PhpStorm is actually telling us, I'm supposed to be passing in a Boolean here, but I'm passing an integer, or I'm supposed to be passing in a string, but I'm passing an integer, but I'm passing in a string, and the same here. So this is really cool stuff. This is kind of getting to the point where we're having, I wouldn't go so fast to use the holy grail of static analysis on your file, but it's getting to that point where we don't even need to run the code to work out that we're doing something wrong here. So this is a really cool way of proactively nailing any bugs before they ever get even run on your command line or in your HTTP request. This is really exciting stuff for me. One of the reasons I really want to now adopt PHP 7 and everything I do is because of these scalar type declarations. If we look at the other file, you can see that this is now the return type hint. So this works with the return type hints as well. So you can see that this is a terrible a validation function that should validate whether a string passed in is a postcode or not, and it will return a Boolean. And because I'm rubbish at PHP, I've forgotten that preg_match actually returns an integer, not a Boolean. So when I return result, you can see that I'm returning an integer, and PhpStorm has told me right here, hey, the result of preg_match is an int. You're trying to return an int, and your type int tells everyone that you will be returning a Boolean. So please fix that for us. So I can do that by just adding the =1 here to actually cast that into a true-false value. And now you can see that PhpStorm's happy with that. Everything is working well, and we can return a Boolean. So this is really, really nice stuff. I can see us doing more and more of this kind of things in the upcoming release, where we try and help people with type juggling problems. And type juggling is a kind of a theme of 2016.2's release, I would say. There's been a few other improvements around PHP 7. Mainly around the uniform variable syntax stuff. There's been some stuff added there. PHP 7.1, we've got some partial implementation of the stuff that's coming in PHP 7.1. Return void or null, I can't remember. I need to look that up. But the stuff that's coming into PHP 7.1 certainly will parse, even if we don't have any amazing inspections or intentions yet. At least that code will already parse in PhpStorm. And we've also so this is kind of the PHP 7 stuff. I was going to move on there. I'll check. There don't appear to be any questions. So if there are any questions about the PHP 7 stuff, feel free to ping them into the question pane, and I'll come back and answer them after the next section. So next up, we've got smart type code completion. So this is again to do with the fact that PhpStorm is trying to understand types of things more and more. And because we now understand the types of things, we can actually make your editing experience more interesting and more useful, because we now understand the types. So if I go back to the IDE, because smart type code completion is just a load of buzzwords, so we need to actually make you understand what that is. If I open up this file, you can see that again I'm using a PHP 7 strict type hints, and we're passing in this really well named lots of parameters function, and it takes a Boolean, $a, an integer, $b, a string, $c, an array, $d. These are deliberately ambiguous to make this point. And then we're setting a load of variables here. We've got an array into one variable, an integer, a string, blah, blah. So basically what happens here now is if I call lots of parameters and then invoke lookup, you can see that what we need to pass into the first parameter is a Boolean, and this Boolean is actually being floated to the top of the list. So this is now trying to make sure that what's relevant to you is at the top of your code completion list. It's even more obvious if I hit the $, which is kind of the way I tend to invoke code completion myself anyway. So $y is a Boolean. I don't need to go and look at this horribly ambiguously named list of variables over here. The editor just helps me straight away, the IDE. And again, I can do that. The next one, which needs to be an integer. Oh yeah, $x is an integer. And the next one needs to be a string. So if I hit $, we get the string posted to the top. And if I want to pass in the array and hit $, then it'll give me the W. So this is kind of really neat way that we can infer type and understand types of things much, much better. We've actually improved type inferring across the board. Much better type inferring when, for example, if you use instance of, so if I do code like if $x instance of, let's see what classes we have, datetime, let's say, which is a nice easy one, then now we know that the $x is an instance of datetime because this if block has told us that. So there's many places inside the IDE where you'll find that types have been better inferred from what's going on. Interestingly, in this example, this would work perfectly well if you were using block annotations to infer type rather than the PHP 7 scalar type hint. So if you're still working on PHP 5.6, then you don't actually need, you can still get the advantages if you've got these doc blocks in place. So everything will work perfectly well with doc blocks or with the scalar type hints. So let me So the question asked by Stephen, if you do on-the-fly Xdebug, I don't actually understand what you mean there. I guess that's not related to anything I'm showing. So if you can clarify that, I'll come back to it. So the other point of note here is there's actually a new way of inferring code completion. There's a new key combination. You'll see in my presentation mode when I invoke the new way of invoking it, it actually will tell you that I'm using Control, Shift, and Space to invoke this code completion. I actually had to rebind this key. This is a bit of a gotcha. This is the filtered code completion list, which is invoked using Shift, Control, and Space. So this only gives us a list of things that are either the type that is being asked for or can be cast into that type. Now, this isn't as impressive as I'd like it to be, because basically what would be the best thing to happen here is, because we've got strict types on, is that this filtered list only shows the things that are the correct type. And after discussion with the team, we'll definitely be bringing that into a future release. So this will improve again, either in a point release or in 2016.3. But basically, you can invoke this using Shift, Control, and Space, and this will give you a fully filtered list. So it'll only give you the stuff that is relevant here, which is kind of neat, because who wants to spend all day looking through a list of variables? I mean, obviously, in this instance, I'm doing incredibly simple PHP scripts to make my point. In the real world, when you're coding inside your frameworks, inside your your Laravels, your Zenframes, your Symfonies, Silexes, whatever you're using, you can have tons of variables in scope, and you can have tons of methods or properties of classes. So this works across the board, which is kind of neat. If we go back to my amazing isValid postcode method, you can see this works like not only with when I'm passing parameters in. Again, this works across the board. So you can see that because PhpStorm knows I should return a Boolean, this result variable is floated right up to the top of the list. And if I invoke the filtered code completion, you can see that it only gives me 3 things here, one of which is the thing that I'm looking for. So again, it's a way to try and help us to find the code we want and to code quicker and to code more accurately. So are there any questions regarding the typed code completion? No? Cool. So then the next thing we've got is parameter completion. This is a neat little feature that has been suggested. Oh, okay, let me quickly check that question. What about PHP 5.x? Yeah, everything works on PHP 5.x as long as you have the doc blocks. Just to confirm Santiago's question here, what about PHP 5? In case I didn't actually make that point well enough. So at this moment, I'm using the actual type hints here. If you were using doc blocks, so we're saying the parameter I pass in is a string and it's $postcode and it returns a Boolean, all of this stuff still works. You don't actually need to have the type hints here. It'll work if you have the doc blocks to let PhpStorm know what types things should be. So yeah, it either works with type hint or it works with type doc blocks. So the next thing we've got is parameter completion. Again, this is kind of wrapped up in the same kind of vein as what we've looked at before. So if we go back to our incredibly horrible and complex function, we now have to pass in 1, 2, 3, 4 parameters, and they're all needed. They're all, what's the word I'm looking for? They're all actually required parameters. None of them are optional. So we need to pass these in, and this can be a pain. This can be a pain when you're using PHP's inbuilt functions. It can be a pain when you're using other people's libraries to pass all these parameters in. So this is a ticket that was opened by a user that we've actually implemented. If you just want to quickly fill in those parameters and be able to move back and forth, you can use the keyword params, which will actually fill these in for you and allow you to move back and forth between the parameters to complete them. This may look familiar to you if you've used other IDEs. So we can move back by using Shift to move forward using Tab to move forward and Shift and Tab to move back. And again, when we press Enter to accept a code completion, it'll automatically move us on to the next parameter. So this should make completing these parameters as quick as we possibly can, which is kind of neat. if, so you can do this anywhere you want. You can just type params in, and you'll get this completion. You can do array chunk, for example, params, if I could type. So this is a really neat way. It works with methods, with PHP's inbuilt functions, and with userland functions. If you really like this functionality and you don't want to have to keep typing params, then yeah, you can turn that on for default. This is what I had to turn off earlier because I forgot to disable it before the webinar started. So under the settings pane, you can see I'm in editor, and then general, and then smart keys, and we scroll down to the bottom and we say enable smart function parameter completion. So now I don't even need to type the keyword. If I invoke this function, I automatically get that functionality added for me. And again, I can tab forwards. Sorry, it accepted the code completion there. And I can shift tab backwards. If you want to invoke it because you've already got the function there, you can still use the params keyword. It's kind of neat. I've had this turned on for only a few days, and it's a bit of a difference. It's a bit of a different way of working, but actually I quite like it. I am tending to use this as my default switched on kind of way of working, which is quite nice. So this is parameter completion. Are there any questions? Let me quickly check. So I don't see any. There are some questions. If I'm ignoring your questions, it's because they're out of scope, and we are on fixed time. So for example, so Stephen, we will be covering the Xdebug stuff later on. So yeah, we will be covering that later on. So I'll answer your question in there, and there's no other questions we need to do, so we can move on. And so next up, we've got @throws improvements and kind of improved unused imports inspection. So we've just kind of tidied up a couple of inspections inspections that have been in the IDE for a while. So we'll just take a quick look at those. So the first thing we want to look at is the improvements to the @throws stuff. So you can see if you're interested, I'm using recently edited files to quickly find the file I want, which is Shift Command and E to bring up the recently edited files, which is the kind of way I'm navigating around the IDE recently since reading some other blog posts on how other people use the IDE. I tend to like this nice screen. So if we open the @throws file, the people who are asking what theme I'm using, this is Material. It's a Material theme, which is a plugin that you can download from the plugin library, and this is Peacock. Material Peacock by Sean McCool. I'll tweet about where you can find that later if you like this style. I have tweaked it a little bit for colors because I didn't like the default colors, but yeah, it's a pretty cool theme. So let's take out these doc blocks here, and this is probably a kind of a simplification of stuff that will be happening in a lot of people's code every day. You've got a method, excuse me for not including the public, it wouldn't fit on the screen. It appears that it does fit on the screen now. I'm running at a better resolution, so I only got rid of those public keywords just for convenience. This isn't the way I would really code. But we've got a function that throws an exception. And if I automatically add the doc blocks, I can just do / and it'll automatically add the doc blocks for me, which is kind of neat. You can see that it automatically adds the @throws annotation for me because we're throwing a bad function call exception in this. And if I do the same here, excuse me, I've got something turned on which I shouldn't. This is bad. In fact, let's just cover it. You can see that with this new inspection, this new intention, we're actually picking up the fact that this also throws exception method can either throw an invalid argument exception, or it can call throws exception, which can call a bad function call exception. So we can actually have both of these annotations for throws because this method could throw either of these exceptions. I have mixed feelings on whether this is good practical thing to do or whether this is a crazily bad thing to do, because technically The fact that this method has its own @throws, it should be good enough. I don't know whether this is going to be something that will catch on, or whether this is like not really needed. Of course, the problem here is that in the real world, you could go down the tree of method calls in this object and in other objects and end up with 50 @throws annotations. So the way that we can configure this method, I've got it turned on at the moment. So what we need to do here is editor, and then code style, there we go, and then PHP, and then PHPDoc. And you can see that I have the call tree analysis depth set to 1, which is why we get 1 level of extra annotations added. So naught disables this functionality, turns it back to what it was before. We don't want to ignore runtime exceptions. And then if I set it to 2 or above, you notice the PhpStorm's giving me a warning to say, whoa, having this set too high could actually nail your performance. You could imagine that having to do this kind of analysis on a huge code base could be a real performance problem. So yeah, it's kind of thought that you should keep it to like 0 or 1. It's an interesting concept. It's not one I'm convinced will actually take off, but it certainly is an interesting idea. So I'm just going to quickly check the questions again. Is there a shortcut to toggle focus between editor and sidebar but keep both open? I think Command 1 does that, right? Oh, no, it doesn't. I don't know, Sasa. I will certainly take a look and keep an eye on the Twitter feed, and we'll answer that. At this moment, I suspect the answer is no. How deep does the introspection go? We've answered that question, Dan. Thank you very much. So if you add more function arguments or more exceptions, does it automatically update the document block? No, you would have to actually have to invoke that intention yourself. So for example, if we say if true throw new, what exceptions do we have available without me having to go bad method call exception will do. So now this can never fire, of course, which is why, but we would need to actually manually invoke the intention to get this updated. It wouldn't update automatically. It would, if I wrote code that actually parsed correctly, PhpStorm would show squiggly lines. So exactly like this, it would let you know that there was a problem, but it wouldn't actually fix the problem for you. The way you fix the problem when you have squiggly lines is to use Alt and Enter to find out what intentions we can run on this problem. In this case, it's update php.comment, so that would fix it for us. Hope that answers your question. And we're doing okay for time. Cool. So the other inspection we've improved is the unused imports inspection. This has been like very painful, but for a very small subset of people who code in a certain way. So if we pull up the right file here, which I guess will be called imports, as that's what we're covering. So you can see that we've got 2 namespaces here. We've got a namespace Pokemon because, yeah, Pokemon Go was all the rage when I was writing this. Now I feel a bit foolish, I'll be honest. But we've got a namespace called Pokemon and a namespace called Hooray, and we can import things from Pokemon into the namespace Hooray so that we can use them. And we just use the use keyword as normal. So we can say, for example, in the traditional way, we want to use Pokemon/LifeDrain. And we can just use that in, import that in exactly the same normal way. And if I then do a Shift Command Alt and L to bring up the reformats file and optimize the imports, because this isn't being used, it'll automatically get removed. Now, this isn't anything new. People who are like me and who use the reformat file, reformat code stuff, I kind of hit Command Alt and L 50 times when I'm coding because I'm terrible at remembering code style. So I just bang the keys with my fat fingers until I've got the code that actually works, and then I'll just get PhpStorm to reformat it for me. But if you use that a lot, you'll be familiar. But this didn't actually work before, because we can now do things like use a constant. So we can use this name constant in this array class, or we can use a function. Again, you can use the use key, the use and then function keyword, and we can import constants and functions into this namespace. So we can now use these constants and functions. And previously, when we did a reformat code and optimized imports, these wouldn't be detected and they would just be left in the file. So it's kind of cool, actually. I found quite a few unused imports actually in the code bases I manage that have been cleaned up nicely by this new tweaked intention. Sorry. I really, I don't know if everybody will get a lot of benefit out of this, but look, removing unneeded code, always a big win. So yeah, it's kind of interesting, and hopefully this will lead to less code for a lot of people. Any questions? And I don't see any more important questions. Cool. So then we come to, I'll be honest, the most exciting thing for me in this release, mainly because I annoyed the developers every week, and I annoyed Anna every week until it got implemented, was the PHP 7 stuff. Because personally, as you can tell, I this is really cool stuff that will help me out on a daily basis. But excuse me, I muted the microphone and it didn't unmute. Sorry. So yeah, this on-demand CLI is like right up there with one of my favorite improvements. So this solves a problem I didn't even kind of realize that I had until we came to this release, and this on-demand CLI was added, and I was thinking, wow, yeah, this does actually help me to do things quicker every single day. So this may well look familiar to people. So just to confirm here, I'm going to do a PHP-V. I'm not using the IDE terminal because it doesn't screencast particularly well. I do tend to use the IDE terminal now and again. When I'm doing loads of terminal work, I'll open my own terminal because, sometimes it's nice to have the dedicated tool for what you're doing. If I'm just doing something brief, I will use the IDE terminal. So recently, I don't know, 3-6 months ago, Jordi Bocciano, who's the creator and maintainer of Composer, added a warning to Composer. So this should look familiar to anyone who's been using Composer with Xdebug enabled, saying, Composer with Xdebug really slows me down. Please, think about disabling it. And I didn't realize just how much Xdebug slows down your command line PHP. So when you're running your unit tests, when you're running your Composer, when you're doing all this command line PHP that we do quite a lot now, Xdebug has a huge detrimental impact on performance when you're running command line, and it's particularly noticeable in fairly large test suite. So if you're using PHP unit or using PHP spec, or and you're writing unit tests, or you're writing acceptance tests in Gherkin, and this stuff is all slowed down by Xdebug. But of course, the flip side is that Xdebug gives us the ability to step debug. Excuse me. Gives us the ability to step debug our command line script. So it's a trade-off, the performance hit against the ability to step debug and profile command line PHP scripts. Well, this new on-demand, this kind of gives us the best of both worlds. We can now disable Xdebug for our global command line, and PhpStorm will enable it just in time when we want to just debug or profile command line scripts from within the IDE. So this is really super cool. And as I say, since I've had Xdebug disabled from a command line, I've had it enabled for years. I hadn't kind of realized how much time I was wasting on every test suite run, on every Composer update or Composer install. So this is kind of cool. So the first thing I need to do is to actually give focus to my terminal, and then that's all I want to do is move my xdebugini file to be called xdebugini.no. So I no longer want to run Xdebug. So if I php-v, just to confirm to everyone, I'm running PHP 7.0.9 and I have no Xdebug enabled. Okay, so just to confirm. And then we go back to PhpStorm. Excuse me, my throat is dry already and I've only been waffling on for 25 minutes. So let's open up my debug. And what I'm going to do quickly is to edit my configurations and remove this, because I want to show you how easy it is to do this, like right off the bat. So the first thing I wanted to show to you is how do we kind of enable this. So we just go to settings. The presentation assistant isn't showing you. I'm using command and comma to quickly get to my settings. It's another keyboard shortcut I've only found recently and find that I use several times a day now, so it's kind of useful. So what we want to do here is go to Languages and Frameworks and PHP, and this is kind of the typical way that you will tell PhpStorm which interpreter to use. I'm doing everything locally. This works absolutely perfectly well if you're using a virtual machine, if you're using a container, if you're using Vagrant, or if you're using Docker. This will all work perfectly well as it does if you've got everything installed locally. So all I've done here is, if we just take this out of here and refresh, you can see that I've got my PHP executable set up. PhpStorm's detected the version. There's no debugger installed, so there's no debugger installed in the default install of PHP because I just disabled it. And there's my configuration file. So all we need to do here is to browse to the location of the actual Xdebug extension. So I can just paste that in there because I'm not going to go browsing on my file system while we're recording a webinar. And then I can refresh, and you can see that PhpStorm has now detected the fact that I have an Xdebug debugger available, 2.4.0. So this is all we need to do. Anytime the PhpStorm now needs to debug or profile, it will run the command line script it needs to run with the correct parameters to invoke Xdebug just for that request. So if we go back, really simple script. All I'm going to do here is to set a breakpoint. Okay, I'm going to edit configurations and remove this, even though I thought I just did. Because I want to show you that it is that easy. So I have no configurations, no run configuration set up, nothing. I'm not going to listen for debug connections like I would normally need to do. All I'm going to do here is to right click on the script and go to debug, and then you may not be able to see this so well in the webinar or in the recording, but there's two options here. One is to debug this as a excuse me. It's better. One is to debug this as a JavaScript file, one is PHP. This has just got a little PHP logo. So I just want to debug it as a PHP. And you can see straight off the bat that we are just debugging. Now we're in step debug mode. The Xdebug has been invoked just for this command line request. Command line, I guess, request will do. And we're right there in debugger mode. We've got our random number set here. We can step in. Yep. 18 is indeed even, so everything looks fine. So we've invoked Xdebug just in time, and this is really cool. The other thing that's really cool is we can see exactly what PhpStorm has done to invoke that extension just in time. Now, the reason why I like this is because I use the command line PHP built-in web server when I develop a lot. Instead of working with Vagrant or with Docker, sometimes I just want to spin us, get a website in, up and running really quickly so I can take a quick look at it. So I use that. So I've just created a little script that will start the server with these command line switches that I just copied straight from here. So now I can start my PHP server with Xdebug enabled, but I don't need it to be enabled globally, which is really cool. So again, this is one of the things I didn't even realize was going to help me, but particularly when I'm running big test suites, when I'm working on a Zen framework project and I'm running test suites that run to hundreds of tests, this is a real time saver. So I'm just taking a quick look at the questions. Fahad, apologies if I've mispronounced the name, asks, is there no way to keep Xdebug and get good performance? The way that Xdebug works as an extension is just naturally going to retard the performance. There's no way around it. The fact is, just to having Xdebug enabled means that PHP compiles to opcodes and works with opcodes in a much more complicated way. I'm simplifying that a bit, but it's just basically impossible to have Xdebug enabled and not have the performance hit. So Laz asks a question. To be honest, Laz, is out of the scope of this webinar. If you're having problems with optimized imports, drop us a tweet or open a support request from inside the IDE. You can use the help menu to just open a support request. If you're having a problem, and somebody will help you, or see if there's an existing bug in the bug tracker. Okay, cool. So there's no more questions. Now let me make sure that I run through this debug session, because that always comes back to bite me whenever I leave a debug session half running. Weird things can happen. So yeah, always remember to finish off your debug sessions before moving on to something else. So the next thing, it didn't particularly excite me when I read about it. I'll be perfectly honest, and I'm sure that Anna and the team were like, "Oh," but if I'm honest, it really wasn't something that really jumped out at me. But now that I've started using it, I am actually using this in the real world, and it's kind of helpful. So this is something that's this is template project. So I'm going to quickly switch to another instance of PhpStorm. And in this instance of PhpStorm, this is Zen Framework 3. I apologize if this is not your favorite framework, if you're a Laravel user or a Symfony, Silex, Slim, Cake, whatever, CodeIgniter, I apologize. This is something I'm familiar with, and when I like to demo stuff that I'm familiar with. So as you can imagine, it makes life a lot easier for me. So basically what happens with the new version of Zen Framework is you get a very, very lightweight skeleton application installed for you. So you don't get, these are the modules that I've loaded here, but when this comes out of the box, you literally only get these 3 actual modules loaded. So, these 2 applications loaded. You get a router and you get the application where you can put your code. You can create your own modules if you don't want to use application, but effectively you get 2 modules loaded. Now, this is great. I can use Composer Create Project, give it the name of the skeleton application. It will always pull this down, and that's really cool. But for me, there's things I do every single time I create a new project. So for example, personally, I'm always going to want to log stuff. Things are going to go wrong. I'm always going to want to have a log file where I can dump exceptions, or I can turn on some debugging to try and find something that's going wrong in production. I'm always going to want to have a log array available. So the first thing I do is to Composer requires end log, which adds this here. And then, excuse me, module.config.php. Then what I'll do is, in the service manager, I'll set up a global logger. So I've always got a logger available in the dependency injection container. I do this every single time I create a new Zen Framework project. The other thing that I tend to do straight away is to enable Zen form, input filter, filter hydrator, and validator, because nearly every project I work on will have some kind of form handling in it. So I'll want these modules installed and working. So the first thing I ever do when I start a new Zen Framework project is to spend 10, 15 minutes doing the same thing I always do, add in some boilerplate, which is painful. And this is why I really did actually like this new project template. So what I can do here is, if we manage project templates, if we remove this so that I can add another one, come on, then what I can do is, I can save this project as a template. So I can say, okay, I want this to be a template available to me, so I can start from this point every time I create a new project. So we can call it ZF3, and we'll say ZF3 skeleton application with logger and form added. And we click OK, and it creates the template. So now, ZF3 was successfully created. It's available in the new project wizard. So now anytime I want to create a new Zen Framework 3 project with all my boilerplate pre-configured, I can just go to new project. And down here in user defined, you'll see ZF3. And I can create it here, ZF3 new project, third. And if I create, you can see that it's applying the template. I'll open it up in a new window. And effectively, we've just got a brand new project being indexed, so it's going to take forever because it's got the whole of the Zen framework in here. But you can see we've just got a brand new project which is created with all the boilerplate from the starting point that I saved. So this is kind of cool. If you're like me and you tend to do the same configuration every time you start a new project, and having this starting point is pretty neat, actually. I think this is interesting. I'm not 100% certain where this fits in with like Composer Create Project, or how I'll end up sort of working with Create Project and working with PhpStorm's new project. In my mind, I'm not 100% about how these two will interact yet. I guess I'll keep needing to Composer update as soon as I create a new project from within PhpStorm to make sure everything's up to date. But it's something to think about. The project templates can be shared with other people on a development team, and it is as simple as copying a directory from your .idea folder, I believe. I'm probably making a big fool of myself here, but I'll go out on a limb and say that they're stored. They're either stored in the .idea folder. No, they're not. They're stored in your global settings in your machine. I don't know off the top of my head exactly how to do that, but I'll make sure that Anna it creates a ticket for me to blog about that soon, because that is a really good question, and so keep an eye on the blog or the Twitter feed, and I'll blog on that soon. Templates can't be parameterized at the moment, no. Morton, it's not something. Create a feature suggestion on how you track if you think that's something that would be of interest. Any more questions? Okay, everything looks good and we're doing okay for time, so this is all good. So the next thing that we want to look at is the Joomla support. This is a trend where we've been trying to add at least some fundamental support for some of the major CMSs and frameworks, with every couple of releases. And we've created a plugin with Joomla support, which gets released in 2016, which got released with 2016.2. Again, this is kind of cool, and effectively we can do a couple of things with Joomla now. The first thing that we can do is we detect when it's Joomla and we prompt you to enable the Joomla integrations. That's kind of neat, but I think my favorite functions here is how we have this Joomla integration and we can create new projects that will drop right into Joomla. So I'm going to create a Joomla module, and you can see that I need to tell PhpStorm where my global Joomla install is located. In this instance, it's in users gh www Joomla, and I'm going to say new Joomla project module. 03 is today's date, so that I don't already have something from when I was practicing and end up showing you all something that already exists. So we're going to open it into a new window. So you can see that PhpStorm's created the new Joomla module for me, and it's already created some boilerplate for me, which is really nice. So it's created the XML file with all the configuration for me. This will be familiar to Joomla developers. If you're not a Joomla developer, I apologize. But it also creates the PHP stuff that we need. I don't know why it's giving us. Oh, it's okay. It's just telling me that I can't analyze this because it's a dynamic expression, which is completely fine. So the other things that we have here, we have some basic support for Joomla's helper functions. So we can, for example, use the global JHTML function with the static underscore method, which you've always been able to do with code completion because the code completion's been good. But we can now click, if I actually write the right word, we can now actually command click straight through to this definition. As you can with anything else, we can infer. We understand Joomla's naming convention and its magic, so we know where to take you when you command click through into these token names. This works as well with the JText, the translation stuff. It'll take you to the configuration file. If you put a token in that's valid, it'll take you right to the configuration file that defined that token. The other kind of neat thing that happens here is that we can immediately create a working database browser connection right from the configuration file. Obviously, Joomla already has a configuration file that has the server IP address, the username, the password, the database name for Joomla. So rather than us have to manually enter that into the database browser, if you haven't seen the database browser, and this is kind of cool, it's a full working instance of our database browser called DataGrip, and it's available right from within the IDE from the database panel. So we can say install from sources. Immediately, PhpStorm's detected the Joomla data source from our global file, and you can see that it's pre-configured all this here. So if I click test connection, you can see successful. So I can just apply and OK. So I've immediately created a connection to my database within like 2 clicks and within 10 seconds or so. So this is kind of neat. You can see straight away that we have a straight into our database here. The other nice thing is that PhpStorm with the Joomla plugin enabled allows us to understand the concept of this BCTM1, which is just like the pseudo-random prefix to the table names that Joomla uses. So I can have full code completion without actually needing to oh yes, I need to configure this first. That is correct. So what I need to do here is to tell PhpStorm the database. This is, I need to tell it which database I'm using. Oh yes, I know where to do that. Apologies here. It's gone so well, something had to go wrong at some point. So, I can't remember how to enable this, and that's kind of embarrassing. It basically, at this point, PhpStorm doesn't know that this is a MySQL database, and I actually cannot remember the keyword that I can search for in the settings to set this. It is. Do you remember, Anna? Are you available?
Yeah, I think it should be in dialects.
Dialect, that's the word I'm looking for. Thank you very much. Yeah, I had a complete mental breakdown there. So I just need to tell PhpStorm that I'm working with a MySQL database here. Apologies for that. Thankfully, teamwork saved the day. So, select staff from. Now you can see immediately that I get full code completion now that I've told PhpStorm that we're working with a MySQL data source, and I don't need to actually include this BCTM1 prefix. We can just have code completion ignoring it because PhpStorm can infer it from our config file. So that's our Joomla. Are there any more general questions? Let me have a quick scan through it. In fact, let's cover the last part, give people a chance to ask any final questions. So the other thing that we've done is there is a metadata file available in PhpStorm that allows you to, excuse me a sec, that allows you to add your own code completion. So on a per project basis, you can use this meta file to invoke code completion on things that PhpStorm wouldn't actually be able to infer otherwise. I'm not going to give a demo of it today because it's kind of a full webinar or video of its own, but keep your eyes open. We've done tons of improvements around this area, and the idea is that you should be able to generate your own meta files for your own projects or your own framework. So this is kind of a neat, cool idea for power users who want to be able to, you know, if you're using magic methods, __get or _set, and you still want to give your developers code completion, We can't understand your code base as well as you can, so it allows you to be able to set up your own meta file that allows you to have your own code completion rules. Keep an eye on the blog, keep an eye on Twitter. I would expect us to get something out the end of this month, early next month, because I'm going to be on leave for a couple of weeks. But we're definitely excited about this area, and we're excited to put this kind of power back into the hands of the framework maintainers, the project maintainers, the open source maintainers, and yourselves. So we've done a ton of improvements around there. Watch this space, and we'll certainly bring some more information about that soon. So if there are no, let me quickly run through each of the individual questions. The video typically will be up by the end of the week. I'm not putting pressure on the people who need to encode and edit and stuff, so it may take longer than that. It may be early next week, but generally they do a fine job of editing and converting the video and getting it up onto our YouTube channel. So yeah, if you missed anything or you need a recap, then the video will be available soon. One question about parameter completion. If the function have default variables, will it be added to its default variables to arguments? I think I know what you're saying, and the answer would be no, because if they have default variables, they would be optional. So it wouldn't be added, a default wouldn't be added. So the good thing about parameter completion is if you name your parameters sensibly, and if you name variables sensibly before passing them in and they match, then you'll actually get a fully completed parameter, which is kind of cool. And I think, so Stephen Walters did ask about Xdebug. I think we covered that, so that's pretty cool. Anything else is out of scope. I have seen the questions, the other questions, they're out of scope. We'll either tweet at you or email you if we've got an answer, because obviously we're only answering questions about the questions, the things that have been raised in this webinar. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for using PhpStorm. Feel free to tweet me at any time at GWH. You can see at the bottom of this slide. I'll answer any questions I can. If I can't answer it, I can certainly get you in touch with the people who can answer it for you. If you have any ideas, any features, anything you just want to say, always get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.
So, thank you, Gary, for the great presentation, as always. If you want to learn more about PhpStorm, please visit our website. You can also leave your feedback on Twitter to Gary, as he said already, or to PhpStorm. As we already mentioned, this recording will be available at JetBrains TV, most probably beginning of next week. And follow us on Twitter and blog, and see you in the next webinars.